What's shaking, Twain?
Hey, I'm good on anything, just like gravy, baby. Good to see you, my man.
You too, man. Hey, I finally read Prince and the Pauper.
Oh, is that right?
Didn't get it.
For reals?
Satire! Boom! I got you. I'm just pulling your leg.
Oh, man.
I can't read.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of RT Essentials. I'm Maud Garrett. Today we are talking about clubs, and who doesn't love being a part of a club? That sense of community? Well, not so fast, because this is one of the hardest clubs to get into when it comes to the world of cinema. To get into this club, your movie has to be so bad. Like, doesn't have a single positive review bad. So bad that they're actually kind of worth watching? That's right, today we are breaking down the Rotten Tomatoes 0% Club, and I'm 100% certain you're gonna love it. Ballistic, X versus Sever.
Tracking target. Oops.
Kicking things off is the 2002 action thriller Ballistic, X versus Sever. This movie comes from a Thai film director who goes by the name Chaos, and it centers around former FBI manhunter Jeremiah X, played by Antonio Banderas. After the mysterious death of his wife, he's become a bit of a recluse, but is blackmailed back into the service to track down a rogue DIA operative named Sever, played by Lucy Liu. As X and Sever square off, they eventually figure out that there's a much bigger villain at play, and they ultimately decide to team up to fight their new common enemy, while also searching for the most deadly new weapon on Earth. Sold. Despite what was considered pretty solid star power at the time with Antonio and Lucy, this film could have looked a lot different.
Guys! Drop your weapon. Okay.
Along with having various working titles along the way, like Legion and Gunner, which, let's be honest, anything would have been better than the title that they went with. Wesley Snipes and Jet Li were once in talks to star, and later Sylvester Stallone and Vin Diesel. Even Dolph Lundgren was once attached, and I gotta say, X versus Ivan Drago sounds just as good as X versus Sever. But despite the popular names this movie did have, and not to mention a big studio like Warner Brothers behind it, it was still universally panned by critics as one of the worst films ever made. And for good measure, it lost somewhere around the $50 million mark thanks to a poor box office. Oops. And to go along with the big old goose egg on the tomato meter, the consensus from critics is that Ballistic, X versus Sever, is a startlingly inept film offering overblown, wall-to-wall action without a hint of wit, coherence, style, or originality. Ouch. One missed call. You're gonna want to put your phones on silent for this next one, because we are dialing up the 2008 horror flick One Missed Call. This one is actually a remake of Japanese horror visionary Takashi Miike's 2004 film, which is also rotten, although it had more than 0%, and that film itself was based on a novel. Directed by Eric Valette, this version stars Shannon Sossamon as Beth, who witnesses the death of two friends, but learns that it's more than just a tragic coincidence, because days before they died, both victims received voicemails on their Boost mobile flip phones, by the way, from their future selves with details of their deaths. Yikes. Here I thought that those messages about my car's extended warranty were bad.
Which one is it?
And while most people think Beth is crazy, Detective Jack Andrews, played by Ed Burns, believes her. So they work together to try and unravel the mystery behind the horrifying messages before their own phone numbers come up. Whew. I think I just missed a call. The film's 0% fate could have possibly been avoided, considering Guillermo del Toro was offered the job to direct, but chose to focus on Hellboy 2 instead. Plus, Ed Harris and Gabriel Byrne were both signed on, but withdrew for unknown reasons. Perhaps they got a mysterious voicemail about how bad it was gonna be. She's sassy today. One missed call wasn't screened for critics ahead of time, which is never a good sign. But alas, they did get a hold of this clunker and hung up some harsh critiques as it became the worst reviewed film of 2008. The Toronto Star's Philip Marchand said, "The best part of the movie is the fact that at a running time of an hour and a half, it's mercifully short." With an overall consensus from critics that this is one of the weakest entries in the J-horror remake sweepstakes, undone by bland performances and shop-worn shocks. 1,000 words.
Laugh, cry, the close cousins. Just let it out.
He sees the blue pearl.
I've got a couple of 100 words prepared for the next movie on this list, and that is 2012's 1,000 Words. This one stars Eddie Murphy as a selfish, fast-talking literary agent named Jack McCall, who makes a bad deal with a new age spiritual guru played by Cliff Curtis, and suddenly finds a magical Bodhi tree in his backyard. With every word Jack speaks, a leaf falls from the tree until both of them are no more. So he has to learn how to pump the brakes on his speech, or his existence as he knows it will make like a tree and leave. I'm not even sorry for that one. Of course, not speaking turns Jack's life upside down, affecting everything from his career to his marriage with Carolyn, played by Kerry Washington, who walks out on him after thinking his sudden silence is because he doesn't love her anymore.
Honey, I just wanted to try to prove to you that we could still have fun. But I guess we can't, so I'm so embarrassed.
The film, with a supporting cast that also includes Alison Janney, Jack McBrayer, and John Witherspoon, actually sat on a shelf for 4 years before it was finally released, after getting caught up in the separation of DreamWorks from Paramount and Viacom. Or maybe somebody could sense the eventual 0% score and hid it behind some old crackers and a couple of cans of tuna. Not a bad strategy. 1,000 Words only pulled in about half of its $40 million budget, earning full-on box office bomb status. And for good reason. The consensus among critics was that dated jokes, because of the 4-year delay and removing Eddie Murphy's voice, his great comedic asset, dooms this painful mess from the start. Gotti.
Can I get a pass? I'm begging you. Swear it. Swear it on your kid's grave. You won't kill me. How am I gonna kill the ghost?
We'll have to be careful about what we say about his next movie, because, you know, something about sleeping with the fishes. It's 2018's Gotti. This film not only stars John Travolta as infamous crime boss John Gotti, but was also directed by E himself, Kevin Connolly. It follows a young John who found his way into the Gambino crime family after being raised on the streets of New York. He eventually had the boss removed and became the head of the very powerful family. But along the way, he broke a vow to not expose his kids to his profession, and his son, John Gotti Jr., eventually takes Dad's place. I mean, the family business is the family business, am I right?
I know you like John. Hell, I like John. But now that Neil's out of the picture, Paul just wants to shake up the whole administration.
Travolta stars alongside his real-life wife, Kelly Preston, as Gotti's wife Victoria, in what would be the last film that was released before her death. The project took over a decade to get off the ground, with various directors like Barry Levinson and actors like Pacino and Stallone rumoured to be attached. But it ultimately became Travolta's job to lose because the Gotti family personally asked for him. And they even lent many of John Gotti's accessories, like ties and a tweed overcoat, for Travolta to use in the film. And while actors like Channing Tatum and Dominic Cooper were considered to play John Gotti Jr., the role eventually went to little-known Canadian actor Spencer LaFranco. To go along with the consensus that simply reads, "Forget about it," critics, like Johnny Oleksinski from the New York Post, said, "I'd rather wake up next to a severed horse head than ever watch Gotti again." And Brian Tallarico from RogerEbert.com adding, "He may have been a murderer, but even Gotti deserved better than this. Well, if I wasn't dead before." That just murdered me. Pinocchio.
E le monete d'oro che fine hanno fatto?
Le ho perdute.
E dove le hai perdute?
Nel bosco qui vicino.
I could tell you that this next film is actually really good, but I don't want my nose to grow from telling a lie, so I won't. I am talking about 2002's Pinocchio. This film was written and directed by and stars Oscar winner Roberto Benigni and is based on the 1883 novel The Adventures of Pinocchio, about a magical log that falls off a wagon and stops at Geppetto's door. The woodcarver makes a puppet out of it and names it Pinocchio, which then comes to life and is a bit of a troublemaker. It was the most expensive production in Italian film history at the time, with a budget of about $45 million. And while the film made just shy of that, the real issues came with the English dubbed version of the film, with Breckenmeyer stepping in to replace Benigni's voice as Pinocchio. And even though Benigni was criticised for being too old to play Pinocchio, Meyer was then criticised for being too young to replace Benigni. Whoa, what a conundrum.
Uno, e tre!
In fact, the English dub version was nominated for 6 Razzie Awards, a first for a foreign language film, and took home one for Worst Actor, awarded to Roberto and Brecken. Despite the critical and commercial failure of the film, that didn't stop Benigni from getting involved with another take on the famous children's tale, playing Geppetto in 2019's Pinocchio. And while that version is coming in fresh on the tomato meter, giving Benigni a little bit of a redemption, critics won't be forgetting the 2002 disaster or this face anytime soon. Especially after reviews like this from the San Francisco Chronicle's Edward Guthman, who wrote, "What can one say about a balding 50-year-old actor playing an innocent boy carved from a log?" And overall critics' consensus which calls it an unfunny, poorly made, creepy vanity project. Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2.
I'll do it. I'll finish you off.
One day, I will destroy you if it takes me forever.
I don't know about you, but the next movie on this list is getting me hungry for some pureed peas and applesauce. It's Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. Yeah, that meant that there was a Super Babies Baby Geniuses 1. Yup, the 2004 family flick is the follow-up to 1999's Baby Geniuses, which also happens to be rotten at a whopping 2% on the tomato meter. I suppose that they assumed that things could only get better from there. What are you gonna get, a 0? You did. Anyway, this film follows the events of the first film, where 4 babies can communicate with each other using baby talk, and holds all kinds of knowledge and secrets. They find themselves having to use their special abilities to stop a media mogul known as Kane, played by Jon Voight, who is on a mission to crack the code to the baby talk and alter the minds of children. Pro tip, just have fruit snacks on you all the time. That's all you need.
What the heck?
This marked the final film for director Bob Clark, who directed the first film and also a bunch of other films, including 80s classics Porky's and A Christmas Story. But even with Jon Voight, who went on to appear in many more Baby Genius installments, by the way, along with a cast that includes Scott Baio and Vanessa Angel, plus a cameo appearance from O-Town, this film just couldn't improve on the first film's 2% score. Along with earning less than half of its budget back and being nominated for Worst Picture at the Razzie Awards, the consensus from critics is that this is a sequel offering further proof that bad jokes still aren't funny when coming from the mouths of babies, with Joanne Kaufman from the Wall Street Journal calling it unspeakably ghastly. Yikes. Apparently there's a new sequel in the mix, and it's just a bunch of millennials talking in baby talk to their dogs. Jaws, The Revenge.
You're all the same. Complain, complain.
The next film on this list was looking for revenge, but all it got was an invite to the Rotten Tomatoes 0% Club. It's 1987's Jaws: The Revenge. Produced and directed by Joseph Sargent, this marks the final film in the franchise, coming after the certified fresh original Jaws and two less successful sequels, although this one is a direct follow-up to Jaws 2, just ignoring the events of Jaws 3D. This time around, Chief Brody's widow, played by Lorraine Gary, who briefly came out of retirement to reprise the role of Ellen Brody, believes her family is deliberately being targeted by another shark in search of revenge after it kills her son and then follows her to the Bahamas. I mean, who doesn't want to go to the Bahamas? Hello. One thing that potentially put this movie on the fast track to 0% is the fact that the production itself was fast-tracked, taking less than 9 months to complete, when the other 3 films in the franchise took around 2 years each. And the result was the lowest grossing film of the 4. Some good did come from Jaws: The Revenge, though, because it introduced us to a couple of famous lines, including the memorable tagline of, "This time, it's personal." Because the other times it wasn't. It was just a shark being hungry. That's what sharks do, they eat. The other line came from one of the film's stars, Michael Caine, when he was asked about the film in an interview and said, "I've never seen it, but by all accounts, it is terrible. However, I have seen the house that built it, and it is terrific." Unlike my Michael Caine impersonation. The consensus from critics is that this installment is illogical, tension-free, and filled with cut-rate special effects. A sorry chapter in a once proud franchise. Dark Crimes.
Your novel. Same victim, same location, same means of death. Only a police officer or the killer could know those facts. The details of the murder were never published. So how do you know about that?
You really want me to tell you I murdered Daniel?
Did you?
This next movie could have cashed in on the true crime craze that's been going around on the media these days, but instead it ended up joining the 0% Club. And that is 2016's Dark Crimes. This film is based on a 2008 article from The New Yorker about a murder of a Polish businessman by a writer. But it wasn't until 3 years later, after the crime, that a detective cracked the case when he read a crime novel with depictions of a murder that were too similar to be a coincidence. Jim Carrey stars as the detective in this version of the story, who takes on a murder case that resembles a recently published novel. But what appears to be an open and shut case ends up having an even darker secret behind it.
You killed Daniel Sadowski, and you made it look like a sadomasochistic game that went wrong.
Well, that's what you say.
No. That's what you say.
That's what I write.
The film has had an interesting ride to get to our 0% Club, including having Roman Polanski once circling the project with Christoph Waltz attached to star. Morgan Freeman was also offered the lead role before Jim Carrey was eventually cast, with Greek film director Alexandros Avranis at the helm. Dark Crimes premiered at the Warsaw Film Festival in October of 2016 under the name True Crimes, but didn't find its way into theatres until a limited release nearly 2 years later, and after a name change. The film received criticism for its overly gloomy tone and bad pacing, along with the objectionable presentation of abused women. The consensus from critics is that this is a rote, unpleasant thriller that fails to parlay its compelling true story. While Richard Roper from the Chicago Sun-Times was expecting more, saying, "Source material with great dramatic potential, talented director and screenwriter, intriguing cast. That's a promising menu, but the end product leaves a sour taste." The Ridiculous Six.
You're in for a real treat today. This is gonna be so much fun. Just messing with y'all, I'm fine.
There is a word I am thinking of to try and describe this next film, but I just can't put my finger on it. Anyway, this is 2015's The Ridiculous Six. Ridiculous. That's the word. This Western comedy stars, unsurprisingly, Adam Sandler, Terry Crews, George Garcia, Taylor Lautner, Rob Schneider, and Luke Wilson as the aforementioned Six. Sandler plays Tommy, an orphan raised by Native Americans who discovers that he actually has 5 outlaw half-brothers who all share the same bank-robbing father, played by Nick Nolte. So the 6 of them are set out to find him. Why is this 0%? The rest of the cast is a who's who of Sandler films, with people like Steve Buscemi, David Spade, Norm Macdonald, and John Turturro. And it also featured other interesting names such as Danny Trejo, Harvey Keitel, Blake Shelton, and yes, Vanilla Ice. Actually, frankly, I think them all doing the Vanilla Ice dance at the end of the movie is worth at least 1%. Oh no, wait, this movie is straight up offensive.
Yep. Now they call him Smiley because even when committing the most unspeakable atrocities, a cheerful grin never leaves his face. All right, just lift your tail for me, please.
This film was in production with Columbia Pictures, Paramount Pictures, and Warner Brothers. But it was eventually dropped by all three and ended up at Netflix as part of Adam Sandler's exclusive 4-movie deal with the streaming giant. And believe it or not, about a month after the title premiered on Netflix in December of 2015, they announced that it had been viewed more times in 30 days than any other film in Netflix history at the time. Bullshit. But despite that, and the Idiocracy reunion between Luke Wilson and Terry Crews, critics just couldn't stand this one. Like Justin Chang of Variety, who called it a Western send-up so lazy and aimless it barely qualifies as parody. And the overall consensus from critics is that this is standard couch fare for Adam Sandler fanatics and must-avoid viewing for film enthusiasts of every other persuasion. Oh, that's great. It actually gives me life. To quote my favorite Vanilla Ice song though, too cold, too cold. Red Line. The final movie on this list arrived at our 0% club going at about 120 miles per hour. It's 2007's racing thriller, Red Line. This film, which borrowed its name from the original working title of 2001's The Fast and the Furious, stars soap opera star Nadia Bjorlin as Natasha, an aspiring singer and skilled driver. She starts doing illegal street races for a wealthy music producer played by Eddie Griffin and his big betting millionaire friends. But things get even more dangerous for Natasha when one of the millionaires is willing to do anything to get her racing for him. Redline was not only written and produced by a guy named Daniel Sadek, but also funded by his own production company at the time called Quick Loan Funding. But wait, there's more! He also used his own car collection in the film, going as far as to donate his Porsche Carrera GT, priced at over $400,000, to be crashed in one of the many stunt sequences. Oh my goodness, this guy was the movie! Oh, and one last thing, he was engaged to Nadia Bjorlin at the time and was trying to help her get out of the soap opera world. Oh my goodness, you can't make this up. This film is directed by Andy Cheng, known mostly for being a long-time Hollywood stuntman on films like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and Rush Hour 2. But his action chops weren't enough to save this flick, which wasn't screened for critics, but pretty much redlined as soon as they did get a hold of it, with a consensus that Redline has plenty of bad acting, laughable dialogue, and luxury cars. Well, that's our list of the Rotten Tomatoes 0% Club, which might not be a fun club to be a part of, but hey, it sure is fun to talk about. If it is the Rotten Tomatoes 0% Club, isn't it just technically compost at this stage? Thank you so much for checking out RT Essentials. I'm Maud Garrett, and don't lose all hope on film because there's a lot of really good stuff out there. I know, you keep talking about it.